Good day, everyone. This is Conscious Humans, and today I have one of my special guests, Lyssandra, a good friend, and I asked her to participate with me today because I really want to dive into what is self-love. How does that play in our lives and how it's shifting because it's evolving just like we are. And I know Lyssandra is going to get real with us and share all her wonderful insights, and then we can explore this together with the intention that it ignites more self-love and everyone that may listen to this in the future. So, Lyssandra, thank you for joining me. If you wouldn't mind sharing how you started to consciously dive into the self-love journey and perhaps how that has unfolded for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a loaded question. You know, it's so it's such a great question because, first thought is like, oh yeah, I love myself. I've always loved myself. And then you
That's
kind
a
of dive
gift.
into it, and then you're kind of like, that's not true. It had a moment and a place. And okay, so there was one specific time when I was like, oh my God, this is a pivotal moment when I'm having this huge aha realization that I have not been loving myself and I don't know what this is. I don't know what any
Mm,
means. But before I get to that, it goes, it goes, there's a
mm,
story behind it. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently as like the way we also self-love, it has an ebb and flow kind of too. Like
mm,
we're always like molding that clay of what self-love looks like, right?
mhm.
But this is after years of kind of doing the work of finding that self-love. So let me just go backwards. And
Yes, do it. Rewind.
yeah. And I'll get to that moment of where I was like, "Oh my God, I have not been self-loving." But it goes far beyond that. And it goes back to how we grow up, I think, in a
Mhm,
lot of ways. In my specific case, like my family was such a working class family. It was like you work and that's how you get to what you want. Like you have to work your ass off to like get all the things that you want. My dad worked during the day, my mom worked at night. I had no parental supervision. It was just kind of like, there you go. And my siblings weren't really around either. And so I didn't really have like a strong, we all loved each other, but it wasn't explored what love meant in the family. And so mine was like going into having stronger friendships. And this is all in high school, and it's like having stronger friendships that centered around high schooly things, going to music shows, traveling and kind of like going on mini road trips. But they also were around a lot of like alcohol and doing drugs. Like that's like how you discover yourself in your younger years. And that bled into like college life where it was like, okay, where you study a lot, you work a lot because that's how you get what you want, even though you don't love doing it. And you develop relationships under the influence. Like
mm,
that's how I was brought up. And at a certain point, I became addicted to opiates. And uh, coming out of that recovery, I didn't have a bowel movement for 3 months. And that was like instead of being like, oh, my poor body, what's happening to it? It was more like this self-hatred talk of like, what's wrong with my body? I do not love my body. I'm broken. All of these like unloving thoughts. And that's what got me onto this like healing journey and this like into the health world was trying to discover what was going on with my body. And holistically, it was by default because Western medicine didn't really help me. And so I was like, okay, I have to do this. I have to do it naturally. I have to figure it out on my own. And um, I did end up going to like nutrition school and started to like learn, but it wasn't until I started seeing an applied kinesiologist who was muscle testing me to help me improve my gut and my health. And after a few sessions and I was doing all the recommendations, nothing seemed to really be working. And one day she muscle tested me and she said, repeat after me, and then I'm going to muscle test you. She was like, I love myself. And if anyone's familiar with muscle testing, it's like applying a little bit of pressure onto the hand. And if it weakens, there's a stressor in the body, and the body's reacting and saying, this is untrue, or this is inaccurate, or this isn't aligned with my energy field. And
Right.
when I said, I love myself, and she tested and it just went down instantly, that was that aha. I was just tears, just like my heart broke. And like, it was just tears where I was like, oh my God, I don't love myself. And that was such an interesting thing because it wasn't like me starting to ruminate, like, what are the things that led me to me not self-loving myself? It was more like, what? Like, it was a shock. It was like, I don't know what that means. I've never been told about self-love. Like, what does that mean? How do you do that? Um,
I want to thank you for being vulnerable. Like you definitely pulled on my heartstrings. I think a lot of people are gonna be able to relate to that. Like, look at I'm getting emotional just
I got tears too.
so I think it's important to be real and authentic. And it's interesting because my journey is opposite of yours, but it led to the same thing. In that I had parents at home, it was really traditional. I had the best parents that were not that yours were bad, take that back. I mean that like they were so lovey-dovey and so in sync, and it was centered around heartfelt communication, and that's how relationships were created and bonded. And then I went into the adult world and started to self-medicate because it didn't matter what I did, it was never enough to get somebody who was loved me like my dad loved my mom.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's the same thing. And so you escape. And then all of a sudden I went into coaching. And that's when I discovered, holy crap, I really don't love myself. Look what I'm doing to myself. I'm escaping. So
Yeah,
thank you for bringing that through, because I think it's a lot of people are gonna be able to relate to that. And we are worthy and deserve so much more.
I know. And it's so confusing when you start to really think into it. It can be so confusing because you're kind of like, huh? Because it can feel like a shock sometimes. You're like,
It's so subconscious.
it is so much from how we think, what we put into our mouths when we eat, like what we decide to choose to do during the day.
Yeah.
All of it is sort of like, are we are we creating this self-love? Like, we're only here for such a short amount of time. How
And
are
are
we
we living a lie?
yeah, are we trying to live? Like, how are we nourishing our soul, our spirit, our like physical vessel?
Yeah. And what do I
And
really want?
what do I really want? And that's so hard, is that I feel like no one, that's not true. A lot of people don't know what they want,
Yeah.
and you find that clarity in by going into the darkness. At least for me,
The
it was like
shadow, the
you
subconscious.
the subconscious, the shadow, like that. Like, I had talk about like the old thoughts of like you have to really work to get what you want. I had to work in those like dark depths to find myself and to be like, oh, that's where and now I love myself. It
Mm,
just didn't happen overnight. When she
no.
messed me, I wasn't going to be like, okay, this changes today. I mean, it was like this changes today, but it was like this life, like 10 plus years of like of a practice. What am I doing that's serving my purpose? What am I doing that's like elevating me and making me love myself, like helping me? And it's still a practice. Um,
Is there
yeah,
one particular, okay, I'm with you. The affirmations, that's how I started as well. And doing meditations, activations, attunements. We could explain what that is maybe another time or if we have time today. But is there one pivotal time where you felt that you just claimed your sovereignty, took your power back? And because I know I can think of one for myself. Is there one for you that would just, it was like the game changer, the switch flicked?
yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's funny because when you say that, the very first thing that comes to me, which is partial joke, but partial not, was like, I'm never going to have a man support me. And it was like, it's like, I'm going to do things that serve me and I'm going to make money for myself. That was one, but that's not actually the thing that I want to share.
That's
um,
a good one though, because a lot of people will relate to that.
for sure, because it was, it,
You're
and
going from one polar end, one polar side to the other, right?
yeah, and also what ended up happening after that opiate usage was I was using with a partner, and and he was basically supporting us. And so
Mm.
when we got pulled apart because of the drug usage, I had nothing. I didn't have any savings. I didn't have an apartment. And so then I was like, this is over. And then I got muscle tested and I was just like, I'm taking back my
Uh,
like what I choose to do. And part of that is that self-love of like, I'm changing how I make decisions.
mm. You got
But
that fire
it was like
ignited.
I got angry. And I
Hmm.
was like angry at the situation and kind of
Hmm.
angry at myself. How did I let myself get to this point? I have to like redeem myself and like, take it back. So there was that aspect, but then there was also the health aspect because I was still struggling with my health. And it bled onto a bunch of different other areas where I became, and this is, I'm telling you, this was a kind of a 10-year process of like these things that kept happening. After I couldn't function, my bowels couldn't function so well, then it bled into my hormones. And then I lost my period. And what changed, and this is a part of the work that I do, is I had to understand my body and my natural rhythms and tune into who my body, I had to tune into my body and how my spirit and my body are so interconnected, my heart and my mind, the whole thing. And so I started getting into menstrual cycling. And when I started to understand my hormonal flow, and I started to really become an active listener to what turns me on, what turns me off, not like, sexually, but like what doesn't rub me the right way, which foods hurt me, or like which activities don't serve me and kind of like grate on my soul. When I started to really listen, that really changed my self-love without me being like, yeah, I love myself. It was like the most subtle but most transformational and powerful sense of self-love where it was like, I'm actually listening. I'm like, I'm reclaimed my sovereignty because I'm being an active participant in my body's like whole everything. Like from what I eat, from what I'm listening to, from what I'm watching, from who I'm spending time with. And that's like the self-love where I'm like, yes, no more bullshit, no more noise, no more external factors that are like confusing me or creating doubt or like trying to pivot my path. I started to listen.
Love that. I love that so much. That speaks to my heart tremendously. It is taking that sovereignty back. And I know for myself, I want to get vulnerable again. But you've opened that door for me. So thank you, Lyssandra, for doing that. Was really when I made a conscious decision to be celibate. And that is something that is not easy to talk about, but I think we need to start talking about it. For me, it's I'm a lover, and I'm a helpless romantic. And when I fall in love really, really hard. And recognizing what my worth was and saying, okay, I love you, but in this moment, I gotta love me, and I deserve so much more. So I am going to be my own lover. And so part of that meant also exploring what that is and saying no to all the external temptations. And it's also as I become um, more evolved and hold these higher frequencies, I'm also really, really sensitive. I'm going to also go into a little bit of taboo, but when people start to engage in sexual activities that are more of a promiscuous nature, it really starts to take on that sacral energy, and there is a mixing of energy. And I'm going to say something, it's going to stir up a lot of people, but in the spiritual community, there is a such thing as STDs, and they're called sexually transmitted demons. And
Mm.
as you've heard of that, have you heard of that?
No, but I believe it.
Okay. So I made a conscious choice. Okay, I am going to make celibacy not a thing that of like a religious person, but of part of my self love journey and honoring who I am, which is very woo and mystic, and I am ultra sensitive. So I am going to keep that part of me really sacred and special, and I'm going to let that energy center, that creative energy build up and use it to create. And when the right person comes who has all the same things that I have to offer and is holding the same resonance as me, then I can explore what that is, and it will hold so much more power, and it'll be that much more special. So it's yeah, it's the new virgin, I guess.
The new version. And then that makes, I mean, all of that makes so much sense. Like what we, I mean, it's what we put in our auric field, right? And what is actually going inside of our bodies.
Thank
Like how
you.
is there not an energy or a spirit that enters our body? Like,
Thank you. Thank you for creating a safe space for me to share that, because that is pretty out there. So thank you.
yeah, no, I 1,000% believe it. And in old traditions too, women used vaginal steaming with herbs that,
Hmm.
cleanse the space as a way to move out other people's energy.
Yeah, so smudging the womb.
Yes, it's a real thing. Like this isn't bonkers at all to me. And so yeah, and it also totally makes sense that like you are building this like I mean creative energy is in your
Oh,
sixth chakra, right? It's just like that emotion. It's building into the passion that's in the solar plexus, and then in the heart, it's like this full expression.
and
Um,
exploring an orgasms on your own can be just as powerful.
Yeah, yeah, that is so interesting. So one thing, and this it goes align. This aligns with like the heart chakra, and feeling when you're not, at least for me, feeling when I'm not in that space of self-love. Within that, in the last past year, I've been having like this heart pain
Mm,
that has felt a little bit like a heartache, like a heart
mm,
without me, it's not like, oh, I'm not exercising or I'm not. It's not a dietary thing at all. It has felt like this heavy blue kind of like heartbreak. And again, there's like that active listening where it's like, oh, it's because I'm not fully expressing myself or I'm not sharing my gifts like I'm supposed to. My heart is sad. And
mm.
it's like, the heart is like that unconditional love space,
Yeah.
but I'm not giving it that unconditional love because I'm not allowing myself to share my gifts, the way I want to
Mm.
be sharing them. And it's just, there's so much, and that's all to say, it's like there's, knock, knock, knock. Hey, love
Yeah.
yourself. Here.
Listen, the body is really the vessel to communicate. And you're right. I'm glad you brought that up, because that heart space really often is in alignment with our soul's purpose, right? So I love that you brought that up. It's not necessarily about going to the spa or like it's so much deeper. And so thank you for bringing that through. And
Yeah.
the body is really powerful. I kind of want to get your like, I want to tap into your curiosity when exploring love as a frequency and what that means, because oxytocin, the love hormone, and then it does release a chemical, and often it is from something external from us, and our body is communicating what that is and how we can tap into it, maybe without external things. Or okay, I gotta say it. There's another thing that came through. It's a trigger warning for people, but I can't help but feel that there are love scams out there happening. I like to start to trust what's authentic and what isn't is something that I think is really important to discuss, because there are a lot of vulnerable people out there. And like when you brought up that heart center space, and how can we really explore what is authentic and what isn't, and what can we trust? And yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to you and see what comes through.
It's interesting that like what I'm going to say, the first thing that came up was just the flower rose. The flower rose. And speaking to nature as a way to, and I work with herbs, so maybe that's why I'm a little bit more like tuned into them, is working with herbs that support the heart chakra, the heart frequency, but it's also, it's like you can trust nature to
Mhm.
lead the way in many ways. And so it's like the more that we speak to our heart, the more that we like give it a, a voice kind of a situation, will strengthen that intuition where you can kind of be like, that's a bad seed. That is not a bad seed. I
Yeah.
mean, this is kind of a tricky question because
Is it a bad seed?
the tricky question is like if you come from a place where you are like being your authentic self and you're being, you're being you and you're an empathetic person, um, you want to, you naturally gravitate to those people, but at the same time, I feel like more and more there are negative people showing up in people's lives, right? It's just like they're out there. Um,
As you're speaking, I love what you just said about authenticity, because if you can start to discover yourself and what it is that who you are and what sort of energy is authentically yours and demonstrate that, I think you can't fail at that point, because the law of resonance is real. And so many of us are going out there with these personas, and or they're giving off their, it's normal to show your best self, but true love is being vulnerable and loving yourself, flaws and all. And if you can do that and do that in another, then that's the ultimate, isn't it?
totally. And totally. And one thing is like, remember earlier when I was saying like you can tell when something rubs you the wrong way.
Mm. Hmm.
Like, there's certain people where you're like, the more you strengthen it too, the more you increase that self-love, you can feel when something's a good vibration and when
Yeah.
something neutral or when something is not a good vibration. And naturally you would just, I mean, and this is, I'm speaking from experience, it might be like, I don't feel like hanging out with that person, or like, that's not a right fit. Like I feel like the grating, like I can feel it
Yeah.
now about it.
I'm
And that
with
can
you.
affect you, right?
And if you don't have that spidey sense attuned yet, I what's coming through is start to listen to that voice inside your head, because if that voice is trying to convince you, it's probably a no.
It's so true. If it's like, well, and I've done this before in relationships, write a pros and cons list. I do not need to write a pros and cons list about a person. Like, you know,
No, but I did just do a talk about writing down all the things that you want in a person and
that
don't it, but the kicker is become all those things also, because you don't want to feed a part of yourself that's missing. You got to feed yourself first and become that, or else it won't work and you're relying on something outside of you.
exactly. And then again, it ends up coming back to us, to our own selves,
Mhm.
right? It's like, how do I love myself? How am I doing that? And there are mistakes, if whatever mistakes are,
Mhm.
it is like, do I come back and be like, we're okay, we're safe. We're okay, we're safe in our body. I was thinking about self-love in relation to my partner, and being like, I treat him so well, like I would treat myself now, you know, where it's nice the majority of the time. And that's, I'm not perfect, but I treat him really well. And it's because I now love myself and I would never treat someone so disrespectfully or like mean, like malicious. Um,
Yeah,
and
respect is hand in hand with loving.
yeah, and it's like that, it's that, it's not a ripple effect. It's like that, I don't know what I'm trying to say right now. It is more like, it's hard to hate people now because
It's true.
you like, it's just sort of like you let them go. It's more like,
It's true. Well, that's because you're more evolved and you're holding a higher vibration. And I'm with you in that. Like the hatred is just so dense and heavy. And at the end of the day, it's just better to walk away, as hard as it is. And if you don't know whether it's a good choice or not, I'll share a tip that I started to use that really helped me this past year is I will change the players in the scenario and put somebody who I really love in it. So as much as that you can build up a story and the connection can just be so intense and real and strong. And yes, you probably had past lives with this person and it's just all perfect. But at the end of the day, when you ask yourself, would I be okay if my daughter accepted that? And if
mm-hmm,
it's a no, then be brave enough to walk away.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
That's
a really,
It's hard. It's hard,
it is. And then it's also like,
but it's
I,
right.
I swear I have a lot of Libra placements in my chart. I'm not,
Don't share.
I feel like I have a lot of balance where I'm like, I, I can see where people can come from and be like, okay, they're probably going through XYZ. It's fine. Like just kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt. Um,
Yeah.
and not putting too much energy into other people, I think is also
Yeah.
really, because people are going through so many different things
And that's
externally,
their journey. Yeah.
journey, and we're all human beings trying to figure it out, right?
Yes.
And so as if we come at that with like a beginner's mind of like, oh yeah, well, I've never experienced that before, so of course I don't really know how to deal with it. And that person's doing that too, so let me give them some leniency, you know. Of course, if they are like a truly terrible person, then that's like another situation. But like, yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
Well,
like,
no, but that's important because that is selfless love. And I think we do need to let other people have their experience and their journey. And as we go through our journeys, yes, we've learned, but to not step in and intervene, but give them space to have it, because we're all in this together. We're all evolving, we're all learning from one another. And I love that you brought that through. And what's meant to be will be, and things will unfold exactly as they should. And we attract all the right people for all the right reasons. And sometimes they come back, sometimes they go in a separate way. And we need to let go of, I feel, just because you were once one way or hung out with certain people doesn't mean that they need to be in your life forever, because we are all growing at our own rate and all need different things for our own personal evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say they're bad people. A lot of people
No.
in the past are still my friends.
Yeah.
We've grown together. We've just made decisions as a collective, and we have had consequences because of them, but we're all growing, you
Yeah.
know?
And want the best for everybody, because when you put that energy out, it really does come back to you.
It does. It does. Yeah. And it's not, and we both have done a lot of work, right? And
There.
into discovering where, self-love. It hasn't always been like this for sure. And it's always a work in progress. Like life is hard. It is challenging to make ends meet. The things that we encounter, like the things we have to see, out in the world that are harsh on the eyes and like the soul and like how the world is going. Our goals aren't met like so instantly. And one thing that I share with my clients that I do practice every day is positive self-talk, like all the time. And it really starts to happen more often, like the positive thoughts start to come in through more and more, and less of the negative, like you're bad, like those don't really come in anymore. There might be more like the doubt still comes in sometimes, or like fear, but it's not like you're lazy, you're not doing things good enough. It's nothing like that. And so the more I share positive thoughts, or like every day I'm moving the needle, that's kind of like one affirmation that I have. Every day I'm working, every day I'm moving the needle closer and closer to my goal. I might not be there yet, but I'm one step ahead than I was yesterday. And just those little tidbits of like those bite-sized little baby steps start to really strengthen your mindset and start to make you feel more like, oh, I'm treating myself nicely.
Yes. In
I'm
my
not.
coaching training, they say small hinges swing big doors, and that's exactly it. It is those little baby steps, and there are days that are less good. I sometimes we need to cry and go through the feels. Let's just be honest. What I like to do is give myself a time period. Okay, Leanne, if you need to go through this, you get 24 hours or 48 hours, but give yourself a limit. And then after that, it's like, okay, enough. It's time to be your own hero and get up, shake it off, go for a walk, take a spiritual bath. I use rose water in my spiritual bath, by the way, and just get some sunshine, go see a great movie, anything to break your routine and just say, now it's time to make a change. You've cried enough. If you stay in that story, you can stay there, but is that serving you?
Yeah, yeah. Or cry till you get bored of it.
Yeah,
Till you're
exactly.
done.
So
Till you
you
get
just
bored.
had enough.
Just had enough. And I'm a pretty positive person, but things take me down. I cried this morning. I had there was an incident earlier this week and one this week that didn't help that incident. And I cried. And I was just like, I am tired. I'm tired. And I just was just like crying. And I knew I had to get out of it because I had to see clients. And so I was just like, I have to freaking change my energy. I have things to do today. Like I can't. Um, and so, and it's okay to get some rest, take a nap, and let the emotions move out of your body. I can do things a little bit differently. So I went for a run. I was like, I have 10 minutes and I'm going to go for a run. And I charged it and I did it. And that was like and I had seen healers before who were like, you should start running because that grounding, that, the foot on that ground is like your body releasing a lot of energy. And
Mm,
I feel like I'm like a pitta. I have high energy and I need to release it through like strong forms of release, whether it's like breath work or like exercise. That's my constitution. And it helped a lot because it was just like I needed to shake it out, you know? And it helps to move that energy for
yeah.
sure. And it is,
I'm,
it's disrupt it, like you're saying.
yeah. Break the routine. Just break it and then be your own hero.
Yeah. And how can you bring more pleasure and playfulness into your day? Is
Okay, I love that you said that because I feel like that's like the next step. Okay, we love ourselves, but then like as conscious leaders and friends, like I think we need to like up the ante a little bit and start to explore what joy is and how we could bring more of that into our lives. And I mean, like laugh until we cry. Let's shift tears into joyful tears.
Yeah. And that was part of my heart being sad, right? It was kind of
Mm.
like you're just grinding, creating content and seeing clients. It's just like the same routine over and over, where it was like the working from home was fun and now it's just like depleting, right? And I was like, oh, I actually have a lot of freedom. We all have freedom,
Yeah.
in some way or another. How can we bring more playfulness and joy to break it up? And these are going to be some really simple things. Eating in the sunshine, laying on the ground in the sunshine, kind of like being a kid, being a little sloppy, going into a dance move, like dance. I like sometimes it's like clothes for me. So it's sort of like, how can I dress a little bit sexier just for myself that
Yes.
brings me pleasure? Like what changes things, you know? Um,
Okay, so I have to say it because all the things that you're bringing through, that's sacral energy. And that's that creative
yeah,
energy. And that's precisely what I like for myself as well. It's music, dance, film, creative work, whether it's a good book, it's going out in sunshine, movement. It's all creative and it's all tied together, right? So I love that you're bringing that through. And just as a little shout out, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Fall Guy, but
mm-mm.
oh my gosh, I highly recommend. I went twice to the theater. It is so good. I don't normally do that, but I did do it for this film because it really is a lot of fun. There's a lot of action and movement, but it taps into the twin flame journey as well. So it has that element of love and loyalty. So I just wanted to throw it out there. So if anybody's needing to break the routine and go watch something light and entertaining and fun, that's a good one.
Totally. Watching a movie. Another one that I really love to like really inspire like newness and like childlike behavior is going for a walk in like a neighborhood. And depending on where you're at, maybe go like if you don't have a neighborhood that has lots like of flowers, especially right now that it's like springtime. I just was walking around my neighborhood like the other day and just like so many flowers. And then they're all kind of like caricatures. And if you look really closely, there's tons of like wombs. There's so many like vaginal flowers that it's sort of just like, of course, like these flowers are getting pollinated. They're totally getting like, it's just like flowers. It's like, how is Earth creating this like magical thing? And it brings a smile. If it brings a smile, it's bringing you pleasure. You
It's
know,
so true. I love that you brought that.
lean more
Yes.
to what brings you pleasure. And it doesn't have to be so like, sitting on a rooftop, like going to a sound bath. I love all of those things, but
Yeah.
it can be simple.
It can be simple. Yeah. And I love that you brought in that childlike imagination. Huge fan of doing that. I play in that all the time. when I walk, and I did notice the vaginal flowers as well, but when I walk, I actually like to play with my high self or quantum body. So sometimes it'll dance around in circles as I'm walking or break dancing. It's like I can see what it's doing. Sometimes it'll go and give a hug to a person who's walking in the opposite direction or surprise somebody and kiss them on the cheek.
Oh
It,
my God.
I know, I play with that. It's just so much fun because that's my way of expressing without interfering with people's boundaries and just spreading joy. And sometimes there is a little bit of an energetic reaction from that person, which is kind of fun too. But I like to play that. I'm just throwing it out there because
I
it is
love
kind
that
of
you
fun.
shared that. I because I do sometimes find myself like hugging someone and then being like, okay, and on my way, you know? Yeah. Oh, that is such a good one. And it's fun because you're like smiling. There is an energetic exchange for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, a
And
smile goes a long way.
it's
Talk
a
about the ripple.
totally the frequency of the heart expands how many miles? Like so many miles. So it's like,
Mm.
when as my heart is touching your heart is like, we're making that love just expand. And it creates that oxytocin. Like I can feel your heart space right now.
I
You
know,
know,
I'm feeling it too. I
and
love
it's
you
like,
so much. I feel like we need to end it here because this is exactly the right place to end it. I'm feeling that ripple effect going into the multiverse and all these dimensions, and I feel your heart space as well. And I hope everyone is feeling our the ripple effect of the love that was brought through this conversation. Thank you, Lyssandra, so much for sharing and for being my confidant and sounding board, safe sounding board.
of course, my pleasure.
All right, everyone, sending you all kinds of love. Until next time.
Bye.